All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us. This is Aparo's Nonprofit Bites and Insights. These are our free webinar series that we have tailored specifically for nonprofit professionals. Today, we have Tending the Garden, Cultivating Technology for Long-Term Impact for Nonprofits. We have Stacy Rice and John Jarvis with us from Idlewild, who's going to be leading this conversation. But before I turn it over to them, a couple housekeeping items. We are recording this session. All of you who are attending live will receive a follow-up email from me. It'll include the direct link to the recording, so you don't need to go searching for it, as well as the slide deck and other resources we might talk about today. For privacy and security reasons, we are not allowing AI note taker tools in our webinars. So if you do have one, please disable it. I will be going into the attendees in a moment, and if I do see that there's an AI tool, I will be removing it. But I realized last time I can't always tell, so you can do me a huge favor and disable it on your end. And then there is a Q&A and chat box that are available for you to use to drop in your questions, drop in some comments. We will be monitoring both, so feel free to use whatever you're most comfortable with. For those of you who are new to Aparo, really quickly, we are a nonprofit ourselves. We are based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we are a capacity building nonprofit helping other nonprofits with any technology and business process needs and challenges. So, for example, if you are inspired after this webinar around maybe creating a technology plan, that is exactly what we're here to support you with. So we do offer a wide range of services, which I won't go into now, but if you're curious to learn more, visit our website and maybe consider subscribing to our email list to stay updated on our programming. There is one program I do want to share with you right now, and that is our upcoming cybersecurity cohort program. This is a virtual 8-week program. We will meet 1 hour every single week for 8 weeks, and nonprofits will have an opportunity to improve their security posture. There's an info session at the end of the month. Um, there's no commitment at all. Just come and learn. It's half an hour. It's really quick. This is targeted towards nonprofits in the Atlanta area, but if you are outside of Atlanta and this still is of interest to you, please still register because there might be an opportunity for us to expand into other markets for this program. QR code is there, but I will drop the link in the chat in a moment. And then finally, connect with us. If now or way down the line you need help with any of your technology needs, you can go to our website. There's a request form. Just sign up there. And again, consider subscribing to our email list. That's it for me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go ahead and turn it over to Stacy and John.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here. Let me share my screen with you all, and I'm just going to jump right in because I have a lot of content. I will just, a little caveat, I am from New York City. I speak very, very fast. It's just my nature. And so if I'm going at this at 10x speed, like Yenting said, we will share out the slide deck and the recording. John is going to be monitoring questions. So I would like to leave time for questions at the end. I'd like this to be a little bit of a conversation, not just me speaking at you. But this presentation, it's called Tending the Garden, Cultivating Technology for Long-Term Impact for Nonprofits. You will kind of notice that our theme is sort of a garden theme, and this was actually intentional. About 6 years ago, we rebranded around this idea of the importance of tending the garden for technology. Our brand actually is very much aligned with this presentation in general. So let's jump in. What are we talking about today? Let me actually figure out how to switch slides here. Okay. Why do some organizations supercharge their mission with technology and others are stuck, frustrated, or burnt out? A lot of organizations end up dumping a lot of money in a tech innovation project and then kind of ask themselves, was this worth it? Or how come that organization over there is doing it really, really well and we continue to struggle maybe after multiple implementations or attempts at doing it well, still struggle with technology? And I will just reassure you that you are not alone. I would say the vast majority of nonprofits and, frankly, organizations, no matter what kind of organization, really struggle with implementing and leveraging technology in really effective ways. So you are not alone, but there are things that we can do to mitigate this. And there are things that over the last almost 20 years I've kind of learned, and I'm excited to share them with you. So let's jump in. Who am I and what do we do? So my name is Stacey Rice. I am the founder and CEO of Idlewild Partners. I've been doing Salesforce and I've been doing Salesforce is my kind of our platform of choice, right? And I'll talk more about that later. But everything I'm going to talk about today is really tech agnostic. It doesn't matter what platform you're on, what solutions, what products. These are ideas, concepts, best practices that you can take in your tech journey, no matter where you are in your tech journey. Um, but I started the nonprofit world in 2008. I worked at a national nonprofit, actually sat on the fundraising and development team. That's actually where I was first introduced to Salesforce as a platform and actually fell in love with that as well as nonprofits and figured out like, how can we make these things work? So that was almost 20 years ago. In 2015, I founded Idlewild. We're based in New York City. Like I mentioned, actually in downtown Brooklyn, but we have folks across the country. We work exclusively with nonprofits on the Salesforce platform or anything that touches it. So that might be an implementation of Salesforce with any what we call third-party applications that touch it. That's like an online donation tool, a form tool, an event management tool, you name it. But we also do ongoing support, which is the reason why I'm mentioning that is because that's kind of the key point there is this ongoing support. And I'm going to talk about that again and again and again. So we've worked with over 350 nonprofits over the years. In a given calendar year, we work with about 140 unique nonprofits. So we have a lot of experience doing this, and I'm excited to share that with you. I would also just mention quickly, we work with really tiny nonprofits. Like some of the nonprofits we work with have 6 people. We just scoped one last week that had 4 people. So we will work with very, very small nonprofits, but we also work with very big nonprofits, like kind of what I'd call like brand name nonprofits that you've all heard of, household names. All right. Let me go to my next slide here. All right. So a growing part of our work over the last, I would say, maybe 8 or 9 years has been what we call like rescuing failed implementations. When I first started doing this work, 2010, 2011, like it was always a new implementation. It was always clean and easy, right? I'm saying easy in quotes. Um, but now we're kind of going in round two, where what we're finding is that most people have gone through an implementation and have found it doesn't work anymore for them or never really worked, and they're frustrated with their current implementer partner. They're frustrated with their current systems, and so we're finding we end up inheriting more kind of bad or dysfunctional systems and trying to remediate them or to fix them. And sometimes it's after a nonprofit, unfortunately, has gone through this 2 or 3 times. Um, so let's talk about this. What are we going to talk about today? I want to talk about like why these initiatives fail. I want to talk about what it actually takes to be successful in the long term. And it probably takes more than you might think or more than you might want to hear. But I want you guys to know kind of what it actually takes to do this well and sort of just how to avoid the most common pitfalls. I imagine you were on this call, you joined this call because you either are in the position of like our technology doesn't work and we've tried this and we're wondering why it's not working for us. Is it us, right? It's not you. It's the entire honestly, it's the entire ecosystem. Or you are about to embark on this journey and it is absolutely a journey. And in which case, I hope that you have some key takeaways that will help you not to do these things, these pitfalls that I'm about to jump into. All right, let's jump in. Avoiding the common pitfalls. All right, I'm going to go through. There are 9. There are way more than 9. I'm going to focus on the 9 that I see come up time and time again, and the ones that I think are really they're not easy to avoid. Nothing I'm going to talk about is easy today, but there are things that you can, with careful planning, thought, intention, skill, expertise, partnerships, can avoid. The first one is something I call kind of shiny objects. I am seeing this more and more lately, especially with tech innovation. Every day there is a new product on the market that promises to do all the fancy things you want it to do. We often will see our clients coming to us, or I shouldn't say clients, like prospects coming to us, having bought the jumbo jet, this like really shiny, fancy thing that goes a million miles an hour and has all the bells and whistles and all the features. And this is actually what they needed. And this is probably one of the biggest ones that we see often, where I mentioned a client will come to us, a nonprofit, and will say, pick up the phone and they'll say, hey, we just bought Salesforce's marketing cloud, or we just bought a data warehouse, or we just bought these like really enterprise level tools, as if that itself is going to solve the problem. And then they say, well, can you help us implement it? And usually what we say is like, well, what do you want it to do? And that's when then it's like silence. Like, well, we hadn't thought that far ahead. We sort of thought that buying the tool was going to solve our problems. And so kind of ask yourself what it is you're trying to accomplish. And can we do it maybe with your existing tools? It actually could be that the tools you have just haven't been optimized. No one's been trained on them. It's not the tool or it's not the partner, but it's how those things have been implemented, owned, and maintained. And so often we'll hear things like, well, we heard about this thing that other nonprofits are doing. They're all going in this direction. They're all using AI. I'm telling you, they're not. And you're not you don't necessarily have to migrate to that like really expensive, flashy tool to get what you need. And so it's about finding what is the right fit for your organization and your needs. And that takes some upfront planning. Let's see here. Which leads me to this upfront planning, discovery and design. This piece, folks often are resistant to spending money upfront on this step of the project. This is the most important phase of an implementation, and it needs to be done early and it needs to have a proper amount of time and investment in this part. So, what does that mean? You would never, I would imagine, I would hope that you would never build a house from scratch without an architect with some level of expectation around like what are the blueprints? What are we actually building? How many bedrooms does this need to be? You wouldn't put a shovel in the ground until you had done that. At least I hope. Your technology is the same thing. So identifying, spending the time to understand the scale, complexity, scope, what you actually need, what size house do you need to live in? How advanced those features need to be needs to be kind of thought about and spent time up front. And taking the time to do that will save you a ton of time and money. This happens a lot. People skip using these tools, the planning tools, and they jump right to the building tools. They will literally start buying solutions, buying products, jumping to what the end result will look like without spending the time up front to do discovery, proper discovery and design. This is what happens. They buy this mega mansion and they needed this little house. And so why does this happen? This happens for two main reasons. One, at least in my opinion, there's many reasons, but I think the world in which we live in, right, is that there are these consulting firms and there are these product companies, and those two come together to sell their products and services. They're very excited to show you that really slick demo that worked really, really well. And maybe it does work really, really well, but whether it works well for that use case or for your use case is often overlooked. They are not, the folks selling you these things aren't really focused on what your needs, specific needs are. What are your problems that you're trying to solve? They have a product or a set of tools that work a certain way, and they are going to sell you those tools because that's what they have available to them, and that's their job. They are not talking about cost of ownership, for example. Like you might love this giant house with this swimming pool and a home theater, but can you afford to heat it? Can you afford to maintain it? Like these are questions that get teased out during discovery and design to help you get the right solution for your organization. And so what happens a lot, I can tell you, I would say on average, I talk to 3 or 4 nonprofits a week looking to do one of these digital transformation projects. And like I said, they could be small organizations and they could be really big organizations. And often I'll spend like maybe 45 minutes on a call with them, and we're talking about their programs and their volunteer management needs and their fundraising needs. And that some of them are really complex needs. And then at the end of the call, they want to know, you know, so what is it going to cost? This is the question we get all the time. It is a completely reasonable question of what is this going to cost us? It's completely fair and reasonable. But going back to the analogy, the house analogy is a great one because it can be a really small house or it can be a very, very big house. The cost and the complexity is going to be wildly different. And so, without understanding what you actually need, there is no way to tell you what it's going to cost to build it without spending the upfront cost. So, our reply is almost always, well, what is it? What are you trying to do? And again, that's often where folks pause and they haven't really done that due diligence yet. They haven't really talked to their users. They haven't defined their problems. They haven't asked, what does success look like? How do we know we are successful when we implement this? What do we have for implementation costs? But more importantly, what do we have for post implementation maintenance and sustainability, which we'll talk about also? They're not spending that upfront time. And so we often, like I said, talk to these nonprofits who kind of want to know, they want it to be easy. And I get this. They want it to be like, when I build the house, I want to know exactly what it's going to cost because that is my budget. And that is not an easy answer. And so we often will submit like proposals or talk about to clients like, let's start with a really clearly defined discovery and design phase to understand your needs and to tell you what your options are. This is like really, really important. It is not one size fits all. There is not one solution that's going to meet every nonprofit's needs. And so we just can't tell you on day one, you should go. And this is important, nobody can. And if someone is selling you that, here it is, all bundled, nice and clean, I could put a bow on it and tell you exactly what it's going to cost, either one of two things. They're either just lying to you or they're selling you what they have predefined what you need and what that has a cost because they know what they're delivering. But nobody can know what to deliver to you until you've spent the time really asking the questions. And I'll talk more about what does that discovery and design phase look like. And so there's this just like hesitancy to embark on a discovery and design engagement if you don't know what the entire thing is going to cost. But that is just, it's not an approach that you can take. It's not a realistic approach. Spending the time up front will allow you to then just make decisions about what you're implementing that will then fit within your budget and your needs, right? It's like kind of the chicken and the egg, right? And so what is, why are we doing discovery and design? Basically, we're doing it clarity on vision before committing to a path. Do not buy products. Do not pick vendors, do not pick even platforms without having really thought through, is this platform going to meet your needs? Because what you'll end up doing is you'll end up doing the thing where like you spend a lot of money, you invest, you do it a rollout, and then you're like, gosh, this doesn't actually do what we need it to do. And had we asked the questions up front, we probably wouldn't have chosen this tool. But now we're stuck with it. And now users are, they're unhappy. It didn't get the output or outcomes you were looking for. It prevents these premature decisions based on assumptions of what you need. It centers staff and stakeholder needs early. This is really important. Sometimes we'll talk to nonprofits who we're talking to one person. Maybe that's operations person. Maybe that's the tech IT person, the systems person. It's often not the users who are going to be impacted. And so not taking the time to really think about, okay, who are our stakeholders? Who is going to be impacted by this system? What are their pain points and frustrations now? And how are we going to solve them? How do those align with the organization's mission? That all has to happen before you put a shovel in the ground. Okay, going back to my house building metaphor. Don't start building until you know. It will save you a ton of time and money in the long run, I promise. It feels like you're spending a lot of money on the architect, right? And all I got at the end were blueprints. That will save you time and money on the implementation, on the build. Um, it builds internal readiness for change. We'll talk briefly about what change management is, and the value of spending time on this. But understanding the folks who are resistant to change, understanding those folks who are going to be your champions, starting to use the language around culture shift for becoming a data-driven organization. If that's the direction that you're going in, you need to start laying that groundwork way before you start putting up the walls of your house. So what goes into discovery and design? People are always like, so what's the output of that? Like what does the work look like to do that phase one? Sometimes people will call it phase zero just because it's kind of like before we build anything, before we're really designing every nook and cranny of your house, we do need to understand again your programs, your outputs, your objectives. So what does it look like? It looks like this. Your consultant, who you pick, who you're working with, your implementation consultant or your nonprofit consultant, is going to come in and they're going to talk with all of your stakeholders, anyone who's going to be impacted by the system, and that looks like current state business processes, right? So, what are you currently doing, kind of step by step? And what do we want to do? And they do it from the lens, and this is really important, they do it from the lens of business process improvement, not just we're going to take what you're doing now and we're going to put it into a system that's going to help you automate it, right? Like that is not success. Success is let's evaluate our business processes and figure out how we can change them as part of this project. It's going to have at the end of this, so you're going to have like process maps, which actually are super, super helpful in onboarding new team members as well, in training and onboarding folks to the new way of doing things. Like, this is how we used to do things step by step. Here's how we now do things step by step, and communicating that often and early. The requirements matrix is the next layer down, which is more detail around like every single thing you want that system to do. And it's like line item by line item. Like I'm the director of development. I need to be able to run a report of cash flow month by month, scheduled versus received, whatever the thing is. Each thing that I need it to do has to go into this requirements matrix. Now, this is the key to this, which is why this is important. Not everything you want to do and to build is going to go, everything you want is going to go into the requirements matrix. Not everything from that requirements matrix is going to make it into your build phase one. Meaning you need to sit then and prioritize. And so this is where your budget comes in. This is where your appetite for change comes in. This is where your personal organization's like fingerprint is super, super critical because what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, you want this system to do 150 things. Well, you don't have capacity to do those things. Even if you had a $5 million budget, our recommendation would be to not do all of those things. You need to phase this stuff out and do it over time. And so prioritization helps you figure out what things are critical. Could I not live without? What things are nice to have? What things are like, yeah, we don't really need that, but that would be cool. And someone might want something that you just say to them, like, you're not going to get this today. You might get it next phase. You might never get it. But understanding what it is really step one. Solutions with level of complexity. So the requirements matrix says what you want the tool to do. What problems is it solving? The solutions are how are we going to solve them? I said before, there is no one size fits all. This is just the nature of technology. There are a million tools out there that all do, I don't know, online donation. They're not all built the same. They cost different things. Some are super enterprise and require like someone with a black belt to operate, and some of them are really easy that anyone could figure out. And then all those things in between. And so you really need to figure out like how are we solving this problem? Is it a light touch one, or is it really going to be a big, heavy, complex solution? We understand their wish lists, pain points, expectations if it needs it, and not all of them do. Sometimes you need to write user stories, you need to develop wireframes if your tech project involves I don't know, let's say integration with your website or anything that might where I call it UX UI, where like the user interface, it like external constituents, your donors, your board members, your participants, if those folks need to interact with the system in any way, then spending time on like, what is this going to look like? How important is that to you? Then spend the time designing those things up front. This is also really important, vendor selection criteria. So you're going to need to do some of those things that you're going to want to do are going to rely on other tools in your ecosystem. This is just the nature of where we live these days in the tech world is that there is not one tool out there that does all of the things you want it to do. It doesn't exist. At least I have yet to find it. And so what that means is you're going to probably have different tools, we call them third-party applications, that need to talk to each other. So you might say, well, we need an email marketing tool. We need an online donation tool. Maybe we have an application for our applicants to apply to the program. Maybe we need a form tool or there's again, a DocGen tool, an e-signature tool. I could go on and on forever. Those sometimes are built into the platform that you choose and sometimes are a third-party tool. But again, really thinking about what your needs are for that tool and then doing a vendor selection process. You don't have, and again, all of these are a little bit different and how you would embark on this, but that's an important part of this step. And then the change readiness assessment, how ready are we for this change? If we feel like we're not, what can we do to get ready? If you have data migration, so this is honestly, when I do proposals and I'm writing scopes, this is the biggest black box unless I've combed through all of your source files, unless I've gone into your legacy databases, right? It's almost impossible to know the cost of a data migration. It could be 20 hours, it could be 300 hours, and I'm not exaggerating. It could be something in between. So this first phase helps us understand what data lives where and what information is going to be brought over into the new system and what, not just here's 50 files, they all need to go in, but what are the steps? What's the level of effort that it's going to require to transform that data to get it ready for your new systems to digest? And if they're integrations, how are these systems going to share data? Is it bi-directional? What information needs to live in both places versus can be only in one? Like all of this mapping and understanding will then help you pick the right tools. But this is a lot of work and it's a lot of time. And at the end of this, you're not logging into anything yet. You're not clicking, you're not live. You just have a really, really solid picture of the direction that you're heading and what it's going to take to get there. I'm telling you, it is worth spending the money up front. And sometimes just also note, you might do all this work up front and then be like, oh, what we need is a lot more expensive than what we thought. Is there a leaner version of that thing? Or hey, what we learned is that we're not ready for this yet. Like there's a lot of things that are worth uncovering through this process. And then I would say your implementation roadmap, features and phases. I talk about doing it in phases all the time. You'll hear me say it 1,000 times. All right. The other ones are shorter, I promise. Number 3, the silver bullet. This is an important thing. People think technology, broken business processes, and people problems plus technology. They're like often thinking that the technology is going to solve their problems. It doesn't create this, I promise. I'm not a graphic designer. These images are terrible, but you get the idea, right? Is that you have like complete dysfunction, your processes are broken, your people aren't well trained, you don't have a shared culture around data. Adding technology is not going to help you. It is just unfortunately going to increase or magnify or make visible your dysfunction. You know, we always say new tech will usually make those issues more visible and not actually solve them. So if your processes are messy, your roles are unclear, your incentives are misaligned, it's going to be really, really challenging to roll out technology to solve any of your problems. Now, that being said, if you do that discovery and design phase well, and you have someone who is a business analyst first and technology second, that person or a group of people, their job, if they're doing it well, should be to help you think through those business processes and push back when they hear something that doesn't make sense or to say, hey, why are you guys doing it this way? Here are 3 other ways to do it that would be more efficient and more effective. Let's improve your processes along the way before we just dump them into a system. Often what we find, especially folks who are resistant to change, the end users who might really be married to their current systems, right? Like maybe they're coming off of, I'm just making this up, like a Razor's Edge type system. And they're like, I really love how Razor's Edge does X, Y, and Z. And what they will push you to do, push us as consultants to do, is to sort of rebuild what they had in their old system in the new system. And even though we're like it works different, it's designed to work different, we can solve the same problems, but not in the same way. And here's why. It often takes them kind of going through the implementation before they were like, oh, now I get it. But that's kind of the work. That's the crux of the work. It's not just like buying a product, flipping on the switch and having it solve your problems. That's just not going to work. Um, Number four, treating your implementation like a project instead of a program. This is also one I talk about constantly. I think people like to put their fingers in their ears when I say it, and they're not taking me seriously, or they just refuse to, or they just put their head in the sand because I agree, I would too if I knew what the long-term investment looks like to really do technology well. Um, so people and I'd be curious if I could see like a show of hands, like when you're thinking about your digital transformation project or just moving technology platforms or whatever, you think of it as a project. There's a timeline, there is a checklist of things you need to do. There are deliverables. We're going to implement these things. We're going to go live with these tools. And once the checklist is done, yay, we're all done. Good. We can put that behind us. We never have to think about it again. I don't want to, maybe I got a grant from a funder. I wish I could have more conversations with funders about how they give these kinds of grants because they're not thinking about it in the right way. But it is not finite, it is not fixed, and frankly, it's never done. It is when you go live, the minute you go live is really when the real work begins. It is actually when folks start interacting with the system, when they start kind of reacting to what is live. That's the real testing. And this is just something we've learned over the years as well. And when I first started doing implementations, I don't even know, 15 or so years ago, um, we did a like really thorough testing of the users before we would go live. And you still need to do testing, obviously. But what I realized in hindsight after all those years is that like folks weren't really testing it. Yeah, they would walk through the testing scripts. They would check off, yes, I'd made sure that feature and there was no bug, blah, blah, blah. But until they're forced to use it in their day-to-day lives, they're not really testing, right? You need to test in real life. And that's when like the good kind of feedback. So the stuff that is helpful to folks like me when I hear that this isn't working or this isn't built exactly how I want it to work or I want to tweak this thing, you're not going to get that during the project. You're not. You're not. Maybe you'll get some of it, but most of the good stuff comes after people are like, I have to use this every day to do my job. So what does it actually look like? It looks more like this. It looks more like iterative over and over and over again. I also should have said this at the top of the presentation, just really quickly. I'm talking about digital transformation projects. I'm talking about things like your CRM, right? I'm talking about things like your website. I'm not talking about things like QuickBooks or your Microsoft or your email servers. Like there's traditional IT. Those projects should be done. It either works or it doesn't work, right? You go live, done. People are now using Microsoft Outlook instead of Gmail or vice versa. What I'm talking about are systems that run your fundraising processes, that run your programs, that run, if you're a grant maker, that run your grant making processes. These tools, they're never done. They're really iterative, and they're designed to grow and evolve with you as both technology changes over time, right? If you have a platform like Salesforce, there are three major releases every year. Each release has 500 pages of like new features they're rolling out, of which some of those are relevant to you, which might change the way you work. And so that has to be incorporated. If you don't do this, and this is the one that folks this is just this is why we're doing the like re-implementations a lot. This is why we're inheriting systems where folks are frustrated because what they'll say often is 5 years ago we went live and it was great. People used the system, it worked like we wanted it, everyone was really excited, and then they didn't do anything to tend the garden. This is where the tending the garden comes in and is super important. And what they've done instead is what we call the rip it out and start over every 5 years approach, which is we spent a bunch of money, people were really happy, and then every month after that, it just declined and it started to like so wither and die on the vine, if I'm going to stick to the plant metaphor. And so it really is more of this cyclical process. So what does it take to do that then? It's not, it takes a commitment. So let's go through what it actually means to do this well. So a lot of the time as folks, again, think they're going to spend this money as they've got this project, the project's done, and that's it. Because it really should be considered a program within your organization. I think you talk to anyone who works at any nonprofit, they would think it would be insane that you didn't have like a director of programs. It would be wild that you don't have a development director. But if for them to not have a technology, and I'm not talking about traditional IT, I'm talking about your systems, to not have someone who owns these systems, they don't even consider that most often, especially the small to medium sized nonprofits, of like, you just rolled out this enterprise tool or this really fancy thing and you train people on how to use it. And then you did nothing after that to make sure that they had continued to understand how to use it, that people were using it well, that there were, incentives that we were tracking. Are we making the progress? Are we hitting those metrics that we set during the implementation to understand adoption and what people are using and not using and why? And is it getting what we actually needed? We have to keep revisiting that over and over, and it involves having a skilled team. So it's hard to say. I often also will hear like, okay, well, how many people do we need, and what are those roles, and what are their responsibilities? And that looks very, very different for every nonprofit based on a lot of things: how their size, their complexity, what they're using the tools for, what they want to outsource versus keep in-house. And there is definitely a need to talk about that. And so there is no org chart that looks the same for everyone, but there are specific types of roles, I would say, or activities that need to be ongoing forever. And I'm going to throw out three that are just buckets and generalizations, but I think important to know. And I should also mention this, actually, I'll mention it in a second. It's really helpful after you go live, and obviously ideally before you even start the project, when you're in that discovery and design phase, to identify your steering committee. That is what we call like your power users or your super users from each department. So if it's fundraising, programs, volunteer management, I'm going to use three kind of basic structures there. There needs to be one person from each of those teams who's really bought in, who is responsible for onboarding people, for understanding their own business requirements. Like, what does my team need? I'm going to translate that from like, here's what my users do, to what does that look like in our system? And they're the ones then surfacing that and keeping it on track and meeting regularly to understand the roadmap, the priorities. There's also tends to be overlap between those departments and functionality. So if I ask for something on the development team, that likely might have impact on the program team, and we need to be talking to each other. And this also sets that this is a priority for the organization, and it's a culture. It's part of the culture. The system administrator, again, like, do you need a full-time system administrator? Can you get away with a part-time system administrator? It varies. Sometimes you need many system administrators. Again, it totally varies. Can you get away with nobody owning the system? No, you cannot. Someone needs to have a portion of their job dedicated to the tool and understanding the tool. Now, I will just flag something for those folks who are in the Salesforce ecosystem. And if you're not, I know there's a bunch of people who are not, that's okay. But in the Salesforce world, there was something forever and always called the accidental admin. This was when you were maybe at a nonprofit and you were the one who loved technology the most. And so when they rolled Salesforce out, you were like, oh, I'm going to do it and I'm going to learn it. And you became an admin just by tinkering. That has becoming less and less common or less and less possible because of technology tools just becoming too enterprise. Where what I mean by that is if you don't do it every day, all day, then it's hard to get good at it because it's just technology is moving too fast for you to stay up on the best practices. And so you don't, in the same way that you could manage it very well 15 years ago or 10 years ago with not having a ton of skill, the bar has gone way up and the level of skill needed just to keep the lights on. And it's unfortunate. And and it's just the nature of technology. I was talking to one of my colleagues who was just like, it's kind of exhausting how many tools are now in the marketplace that we have to know every day as consultants compared to even 5 years ago. And so again, if you're not living and breathing it every day, you're likely not going to make the right decisions. And that doesn't mean you can't own a big portion of this, but there are things like data hygiene, training, understanding what your needs are of the steering committee. Your product manager, that's who owns the roadmap. This is the one who's really helping you architect, designing new things. This often can be some ways outsourced, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But this is really important. This is not your IT team. This is not the folks who run your infrastructure, the ones who do your servers and your emails and your printers. This is not the same team. And I'm not exaggerating, this is not in 15 years, I don't think I can name a single instance where the IT team owned these processes and did it well. They don't usually want to do it, and it is not the same skill set. And so I just want to flag that those teams, they shouldn't sit on the same team. Don't go it alone. This happens a lot as well. You think about using a firm for your implementation, and then you hope that you don't have to ever call them again. That is not the relationship you're looking for, first of all, but you also can't go it alone. And I said this accidental admin is a thing of the past because it's just too hard these days to know what to do. Always have a trusted partner. That person's going to help you with that, or that firm, I should say, is going to help you with the implementation, but they're also going to help you ongoing. And that doesn't mean you rely on them for anything and everything all day, every day. It doesn't mean you need to spend $10,000 a month to keep the thing going, but it means you need someone to help you with strategy, with complex requirements, adding new tools. You need someone to at least bounce ideas off of because that implementer has done it 100 times. Your in-house staff maybe has done it once or twice. And because it's not one size fits all and it's not that easy, you at least need to say, hey, consulting partner, you know us well, you know our business process, you know our systems. We're thinking about doing this. Here's what we're thinking about doing. Can you poke any holes in it? Can you push back? Can you show us other designs and options? Because what happens a lot is we would go live with a system. The client just hadn't budgeted for more money, thought they could do it themselves. And then a year later, they're coming back to us and we log in and we're like, oh, what have you done? Someone's gone rogue. They thought this was a good idea. And now the infrastructure and the architecture is broken. And we're going to have to re-implement to some degree, which if you had just shot us an email and we charge you 15 minutes for it, I would have saved you the heartache and the hassle of going down that path because that was a mistake we made 15 years ago that we learned from. And I get why you did it. I totally understand the train of thought, but because we have experience, we can tell you and guide you before you make those mistakes. So you always need a partner. You always need a budget for some level of consulting. I don't want to make you cry about that, but it's true. It's the nature of it. Another thing, too much, too fast. All of the bells and whistles on day one, I talk about this all the time, but things like especially if you have a budget. If you're like, oh, I got 150K from a foundation and we want to do all these things because we have the money to do it. I said before, and I'll say it again, I don't care if you have $10 million. Doing everything in phase one doesn't make any sense. You will build it all out. It will be over engineered and no one will use it because it'll be too much change too fast and they will have not thought through what they actually need. So you want to start with an MVP, a minimum viable product. And you want to then, again, thinking about it, you do this over time. You want to add those features, those bells and whistles later. I'm going to give you two examples that are obvious to me that you would never do in a phase one. Integrations with accounting tools. This comes up all the time. Unless you already have your system and you have your accounting systems and those things are humming and you just want to connect them, that's different. If you're thinking about an implementation and you're like, I want it to push data to my QuickBooks, great. You could do that roadmap item. Get your system stabilized, get your development people and anyone else who touches revenue in your system working really well, validating that that is the data model, that it works, that your processes are working. Do a manual reconciliation first before you then start pushing data automated because one, integrations are expensive and they break often and there's a million reasons why you would wait. So that's an easy one. Another one is like people always want like a portal for something. Like they want to their constituents, like their members or their board members or their participants to like log into something like an experience. Sometimes that makes sense. Most often it doesn't. You need to make sure the internal systems are solid before you expose those to your external constituents. Otherwise, again, all you're doing is then just uh, publicizing that to the world. And often there's this like, just because you build it doesn't mean they'll come. So this is you'll hear us again, if you ever work with us, you probably heard me say that 10,000 times, crawl before you run. You start with the crawl, start with an MVP. This will prevent you from over engineering or thinking you want something, spending a lot of money to build it, but not really understanding exactly what you needed. And then you get it and you're like, oh, this doesn't work how I wanted it, and you just ditch it. If you had kind of done this crawl, walk, run phase, you would have started with what you needed and then added things later. And those are just features that are part of your roadmap. It also reduces your first spend in your phase one. 7, not incorporating change management. Everybody knows this. You've heard it a million times. I'm not going to like sit here and harp on change management, but I have to tell you, it is super important and is something I'm embarrassed to say we did not focus on enough in our first, in my first 10 years of implementing. 70% of transformation projects fail. Friction is the silent killer. I'm just telling you this. Everybody knows this. Technology is a people problem first, and the tech solutions honestly are the easiest part of this. It's getting people to adopt them, and there's a lot of ways you can do that. But I think, like I said, for many, many years, I was always baffled that we would build these beautiful systems where the technology is like gorgeous and then no one used it. And I couldn't understand why. And I realized, well, I like technology. I like logging into databases. That's how my brain works. That's also my job. Not realizing like that's not how everyone works. Not everyone's excited about a digital transformation project. Not everyone's excited for moving from their paper case files to a digital online platform. Like not everyone's excited about that. And it does take a lot of thought and planning and the people part of it to make sure that that you're doing it well and people are going to adopt it. This I don't know if you're old like me, Field of Dreams is something I reference a lot. Like if you build it, they will come. That's not true. Scope creep is a dirty word. Number 8. We're almost through, guys. Scope creep is a dirty word. People cannot stand scope creep. They can't stand timeline changes. I don't consider scope creep bad. I actually think that's just a change in your mindset in terms of understanding what you need will evolve over time. If you're starting small, like I mentioned, crawl before you run, it's actually not a big deal because you can course correct before you dumped a ton of money into something. This is a feature, not a bug. So your understanding will evolve. You'll learn more about what you need and what problems you have as you start to use the system and react after go live. Crawl, walk, run is critical. These projects are not 100% predictable. And I want to emphasize something. Even though at the top of the call I said you have a blueprint, this is the difference. A house blueprint is going to be down to the every inch of what you need, and then someone can go build it in the Salesforce or CRM world where things are really, really flexible, it's very agile. You're going to put up the walls of your house. You're going to put in, your the things that you need to survive, and what gets tweaked later are things like your finishes, right? Like you could decide to swap out that oven if you wanted a fancier version later. Let's just start with the basics, and then change it over time. And that's okay. That's not a failure. It's not a failure if you built an MVP, people used it and tinkered with it, and then have a lot of feedback, and now you want to like maybe rebuild part of it. Maybe you do want to rip out that feature and go with a new feature. Again, that's just evolving and understanding the trade-offs that you have to weigh up timeline and investment. And those are not always bug fixes. Again, those are sometimes features. Again, this is part of change management, but you have to be open to tinkering. I say this to users all the time. It's never final, it's never done. And please be involved in helping us design and build and iterate, iterate, iterate. And that means you play with something knowing that it's not finished and it's not perfect, but our goal is to get there over time. Estimates are best guesses because of this. People are like, I get it, there's a budget. There's sometimes that budget is absolutely fixed. But these estimates are really best guesses, and they just are, unless you're buying a product. If you're buying an off-the-shelf product that does what it does, then your estimates should be pretty obvious and clear without a lot of creep. But if you're building solutions, if you're building custom solutions on platforms, flexible platforms like Salesforce, it just isn't the way it works. Same thing with timelines. All right, I'm going to run faster because I'm on my 9th one, the last one. But if you ask me, it is the most important one. If they're certified, they're qualified. I already said this before, but I'll say it again. You cannot go it alone. I think this one is the most important. Choosing the right implementer, no. Choosing the right partner is the most important decision you are going to make when you embark on this journey, because it will impact everything else we just talked about. If you're working with the right implementer, they're talking about crawl, walk, run. They're talking about starting with discovery. They're talking about change management. If you have a partner who's not talking about any of those things, they're not a partner. They're an implementer, and usually they're a product implementer, but either they don't know enough to tell you, or they don't want to tell you because it's a little scary, or they want to get in and get out, and so it doesn't really matter. This last section of my presentation, it's a little bit of like how the sausage is made in this world, and I don't think I can tell you most product companies aren't going to want me to tell you this, and definitely implementers and in terms of firms don't like me to talk about this, but this is just the nature of how it works. So you need to pick this is a strategic relationship. You need to have a relationship that is long term. You need to find one that's a firm that's committed to your mission and long-term success, not just the delivery of the project itself. So what does that actually look like, right? Think long-term, not just launch day. So you need to find a consulting firm that is focused on nonprofits, not just technology. And personally, I think they need to just only do nonprofits because what happens often if they're like, oh, we're mostly a for-profit consulting firm, but we dabble in nonprofits or we have a department that it's nonprofits will get the short end of the stick every single time. They're not taking that seriously, or people just don't know because they don't work in the nonprofit space. They don't understand that fundraising is different than sales. And so it's really important that you have an implementer who speaks nonprofit language and solutions. This is just my personal thing. Like this is happening more and more over the years is that firms, just like every company, no matter what industry or field you're in, they're being gobbled up by VC-backed firms. I personally find quality turnover. There's tons of turnover at these firms. I would say who owns this firm and what's their background? What are their values? Honestly, it's an important question to ask. And I would spend time doing that because I think it will, especially if you're thinking of a long-term partnership, will impact how they treat you and what that partnership looks like. Um, what is the right size partner, right? If you're a five-person nonprofit and you go and work with Deloitte, I don't know what to say. Like that is just a bad decision, right? You need to find the right size, not too small, but not too big. You don't want to be their biggest client. You don't want to be their smallest client. You want to be somewhere in between. I also, not to say there are many, many individual independent consultants out there. I was one for years before I built a firm. And the reason I built a firm is because I realized as an independent consultant, I just don't have enough knowledge to always feel confident in the recommendations I'm making because I need other people's experience to draw from. I need other people's expertise. We talk about like having people who are really specialized. Those people will parachute into a project to do something and then parachute back out. But I have that as a resource that I can pull in as needed. And if you work with either a firm that's too small, you're not going to get that level of expertise. And if you work with a firm that's too big, you're going to get lost in the shuffle. Dedicated expertise on your platform. If it's Salesforce, you need a Salesforce implementer who just does that or does that mostly. Again, that can vary, but usually that's the case. If someone should be figuring it out. Don't ask someone who's going to dabble in it. And please, oh please, oh please, do not use volunteers. I wish that was an answer. And there was a time in my life where I was like, oh, that's amazing. I think that's great if you can do this with a volunteer. I've cleaned up countless very, very well-intentioned volunteers who are trying to implement Salesforce. Again, unless this was like someone who was an implementer who retired, great, but likely a volunteer is going to dig a bigger hole for you to crawl out of. And oh, also, this is just my favorite one. Experience matters way more than certifications. Consulting partners will tout their certifications. Like we have 50 certifications. I don't care how many certifications. I took a cert and got a cert for a product that I had never implemented in my life. And if you would ask me to implement it, I'd be like, what exactly does it do? I don't know, but I studied for the test. I got the cert, so I had the badge. It matters how many implementations they've done that are like yours. Those are the questions that you should be asking. I personally don't care if they have a certification. I know people who've been in this business longer than I have who have zero certs and they're amazing. And I know people who have a website full of certs who are brand new and don't know anything. So just be very wary of that. Process experts, I talked about having a business analyst is really important. I'm almost done. Crawl, walk, run. I talked about this before, but please do this again and again and again. Start with your MVP. What happens after go live? This is really important too. Ask your consulting partner, well, what happens when this project is done? Because I know it's never done. And so do you hand me off to a support team? Is it a help desk? Do I have a chat bot? Is the team I'm working with because the implementers, the folks that are part of your project, they are going to be embedded, if they're good, in your organization. They're going to be embedded in your organization from day one, understanding your users, your business processes. If those folks disappear when you go live, you've lost all of that. And so what we do, and I know it's harder and more expensive for us, but is the right way to do it, is that the team that you work with during your implementation is the team for phase 2, phase 3, stabilization, ongoing support, maintenance. Like you're with the same people because you have to be. Please don't start with an RFP. Oh my God, please don't start with an RFP. Please start with warm introductions, talking and having real conversations with consultants that you've referred, people have referred you. Talk to your nonprofit space, talk to Aparo, talk to these folks. There's other folks in your network. Go there first. You can draft an RFP, but to send it out cold and then expect to get anything back that's worth anything, and then choosing that partner based on an RFP is, well, you'll find out if you go that route, is a terrible, terrible route. Please don't. Also, just as another thing, talking to consulting firms, they're always going to put their commission-based salesperson in front of you instead of what we call consultative sales, which is like, what are your problems and how are we trying to solve them? Not like, oh, if I sell you the most upfront in this, I get my incentive is to do all those bells and whistles in your basket. Your basket is phase one because I only get commission on that first project. And if that project isn't $1 million, it's not useful to me. I don't care if you want to spend $1 million over the next 5 years. That's not useful to me. I need you to spend the money now. And that is not the right approach, but that is the approach that 95% of the consulting firms take. Key takeaways. Your implementation partner is the most important decision you will make. Start with discovery and design, please, before you choose products or platforms. Start with the right size solution, nothing more, nothing less. You can always build, expand, iterate. This work is never done. It is a program, not a project. And digital transformation is 70% people, 30% technology. Please invest in change management. I didn't leave time for questions. I'm sorry. We have 3 minutes. John, questions? Do
We
people
didn't
have
have a lot
questions?
of questions
Okay.
in the chat. If anybody has any, welcome to unmute and jump in.
I told you I talk fast. I apologize. I didn't realize how much content it was, but it was a lot.
But a lot of great content. And yes, you went through it really fast, but I think the key takeaways really stuck through, and everyone's going to receive a copy of the slide deck. So you can certainly dig into that a little bit more. But overall, we see this time and time and again at Aparo too. And honestly, I'm going to take this recording and share it with our team to share with our nonprofit partners, our volunteers before our projects, because I think everything that you just said here is so important. Just starting out on a project, just understanding big picture, what it is that your ultimate goal should be. So thank you, Stacy, for
Yeah,
leading
thanks,
this.
Yanting. Thanks for inviting us. We're happy to be here.
Yeah. Any questions came through? I think.
No, Claire asked to pop back to the key takeaways slide again.
Sure. Let me do that for you. Key takeaways. Here you go.
And Claire, as Yenting said, and everyone, you'll receive a copy of this deck.
Mhm. Yep.
I'm going to drop the post-webinar survey in the chat. So before we leave, please open that up. And I think that's it for today. Stacy, John, thank you so much again. Everyone else, you'll receive a follow-up email from me. Feel free to respond to that with any questions or any follow-ups, and hope to see you all next time. Have a great rest of
Thank
your
you.
week.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.